Good morning, everyone, from Jeff's Little Engine Service. Well, the rain finally stopped for a couple of minutes, and we have a project. Check this out.
Oh yeah.
It's an old Troy-bilt horse rototiller. These were some of the best rototillers made back in the day. I pulled this one out of a pasture. It had been sitting for about 2 years. One thing I really liked about it was that it had a replacement engine on it. It has this big old Briggs and Stratton 1350 Intek in it. And I think this is like a 11 or 12 horsepower engine. Normally these rototillers came with like a 6 horsepower, I think. So we're way overpowered here. And this is a pretty cool engine. I'm going to get it running and probably take this one off and put a more appropriate engine on it and try to sell it. And then figure out what to do with this beast. But in the meantime, we need to figure out how to get this one running. Like I said, it's been sitting in a pasture for about 2 years. I've already cleaned it all up. We don't have any fuel in the tank. We do have some stink bugs living inside the gas cap here. Have to get those little suckers out. But I think what we need to do is head straight for the carburetor, because that's where the problems always are. Alright, let's see if I can get this out of here. I think this gate will open. Garbage everywhere. Alright, let's see what we can do with this beast. Ah, shit. Tires coming off. Well, I'm gonna wrestle it out of here anyways. Bah! Okay. And so the guy I got it from said that the carburetor just floods out all the gas. So let's go ahead and look into that, and I'll show you the things that can go wrong. So to get to this carburetor, to take it off, you have to take off the air filter cover first. It's like we have some more stink bugs in there. Probably time for a new air filter. And this style of carburetor, unfortunately, you cannot just clean the float bowl while it's on the machine, or at least it's pretty hard to do that. So we're going to have to take this off and probably take the whole carburetor off to fix it properly. 10mm socket. So you have your choke lever that comes up through the air filter backing plate, so be careful to get it up and over that. And And I'm going to try not to break the gasket back there so I can reuse it. That's good. And then you have your breather tube that comes from your engine to the cover. So you can just set that thing out of the way there. Now is a good time to check the fuel line. This fuel line still feels nice and soft like rubber, so I don't think I'll need to replace it. So I don't even know what tool you need to grip onto these, but what I've used for years is my smallest socket. This little tiny guy here. So you want to loosen these up. Before I get too far, I want to take the fuel line off. I have a pair of 90-degree needle nose pliers that I use that seem to work pretty well for taking off fuel lines. And if you give her a good wiggle here and work your way up, oh, there we go. Stick this out of the way. Now at this point, if you didn't have any fuel in the gas tank, you'll want to drain all that out and make sure the gas tank is nice and dry and clean on the inside. And you don't always have to remove it, the gas tank, to get it clean. You can just dry it out in the sun, and then you spray some compressed air down in here. And what you'll see is a bunch of stuff flying out of there if it's dirty. I'm lucky, this one seems to be pretty clean. That's a pretty good way to clean out the gas tank, unless your tank is really nasty and you have to remove it. So we want to loosen these up. And you can see for the linkage here that we have this little plastic clip. I'll show you how that works. Before I get the carburetor loose, I want to so this clip, the spring goes through it at this point, and then the linkage goes through it here. It looks like to get it off of the clip, you just have to kind of pop it off like that. You see that? And I guess now would be a good time to take off that spring. And that linkage just pulls right out once you have that clip loose. That's nice. Alright, so be careful now, because you're going to have some gaskets and this insulator spacer here that you don't want to fall and break on the concrete, because that can happen. Don't ask me how I know, but I know. I'm going to put this under here in case it happens to fall. Alright, 2 hands, one to hold the carburetor, one to take out the last bolt, and your carburetor comes right off. Now, you can see the 2 gaskets here and the insulator spacer stayed in place, and I'm okay with that. Usually you can reuse these gaskets as long as they haven't been torn or are too old. So yeah, we're going to reuse these. And we're going to open this carburetor up. You can see what it looks like here. It's a NIKKI style carburetor, I believe. Yeah, it says NIKKI here. And they're kind of a pain in the butt to work on, but we know what we're doing, so we'll get it figured out. There's no adjustments on it. So let's go ahead and take off the float bowl. So there's a gasket inside this carburetor float bowl that's a real pain in the butt to deal with. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so to get this carburetor float bowl off, you have these two Phillips head screws, and that's it. Like I said, this engine's not that old, so I'm hoping we don't have a lot of problems inside of here. Give her a little whack. It looks pretty clean, but I can see that there is some sediment down in there. So we'll make sure to clean that out. Let's go ahead and take out the float pin. And we'll take out the needle and float here. Put my glasses on and look at this needle and see what kind of condition the rubber tip is in. It's probably a good idea to replace that since we're in here. And oh yeah, this piece doesn't seem to want to come out right now. That's where your main jet is located, so you want to make sure that that hole's cleared out. We need to get this plastic piece off of here without breaking anything. I think I'm just going to spray a little bit of lubricant on here. Let it sit for a bit. There it goes. So that's the pain in the butt gasket I'm talking about, that O-ring. You know, everything looks pretty clean inside this carburetor. You can see you have holes in your pickup tube here. You want to make sure they're all cleaned out, and the hole going up through the middle is cleaned out. But yeah, I'm not sure why the guy said he was having problems with this. You also have an O-ring right there in that little compartment. You want to make sure is in place. And you look up through the main jet hole, and you could see all the way through it. So you know it's clear. So I'm not going to mess with that either. So all these little ports and passages in here, you can spray some carburetor cleaner in there, but keep in mind, carburetor cleaner causes this little delicate gasket to swell up and can ruin it. And it's a pain in the butt to get back in there, so I'm not going to mess with it too much. Honestly, I don't see a problem with this carburetor. So I'm just going to blow some compressed air through the jets here, through all these little passageways. And then you have some holes here you want to make sure that are clear. In some cases you'll actually have to poke some wire down through these holes to clear them out, but this carburetor is clean, so I don't need to do that. But I will spray some carburetor cleaner in here, wipe that out thoroughly. A toothbrush in here. trying to avoid buying a new carburetor because these carburetors are like $100 or more to get a good Briggs and Stratton one. This is where the fuel comes in, and there is an O-ring down in there. And you know, so if that O-ring is not sealing properly, you'll get a flooding situation as well. You can see that's the inlet, and it goes right, comes out through that hole there. So I'm going to pull out this O-ring. And I'm going to do a little investigating on this thing, see what it looks like. Well, one thing I noticed is it's really stiff, and when I squished it, it broke. It was cracked. So I'm thinking that this may have been the problem. Let's see if I can get a new one of these. So by replacing these two gaskets and the float needle here, you're essentially rebuilding this carburetor. And this is the part number. It comes with the little O-ring here and the bigger gasket. It's really tough to get this bigger gasket lined up perfectly here. Go ahead and peel this one off. This gasket I think was still good. It's still pliable and rubbery, but the O-ring that I took out was very brittle, and it just breaks when you mess with it, so I'm sure that's where the leak was coming from. It could have been seeping past this gasket, but I believe it was just this one. So this little O-ring one just kind of pokes down into place here. Make sure it's clean when you get it in there. And then this one goes on like, oops. And then this one goes on like so. I think I might line it up on this piece first. Probably the easiest way to do it. Alright, it looks like it's pretty much in place there. And I'm going to spray a little bit of WD-40 on this point here so it slides past that gasket good, or that O-ring rather. And just make sure not to knock any of this gasket out of place when you reassemble here. Definitely a tighter fit with these new gaskets than it was before. Boy, it's tough to get past that one there. Just have to wiggle it in, I guess. There we go. All right. Hopefully we've solved our problems by replacing these rubber O-ring gaskets. Since this is a gravity feed carburetor, it's going to be important to replace the float needle here so the carburetor doesn't flood. Because if that's leaking, your carburetor will flood or leak or both. So here's the part number for the replacement needle. It's kind of a weird needle because it's plastic. It's one of the only carburetors that I've seen that has a plastic float needle. So on this style carburetor, pretty much the float valve, or these rubber O-rings are what would cause flooding. So if you have a flooding situation and you have this carburetor, just replace those parts. The float needle was like $12 and this gasket kit was, I think, $7, so it's pretty cheap. And then this goes back on here. Well, I sure hope this fixes it. And you do kind of want to wiggle this together to make sure that it seats properly on that O-ring. It doesn't seem like it's seating properly, so I'm going to take these bolts back out and see if there's a way I can wiggle this into place. Well, let's just try tightening it down evenly on each side. Maybe that'll help get it into place here. I found that if you use a flat bladed screwdriver on these bolts, you can actually cinch it down a little better. It's all about this O-ring here that's a real pain in the rear. It's tough to get that thing into place. Looks like I still have to scrub off this throttle plate a little bit. And the choke plate still a little dirty, so I'll clean it up. So I think we can put the bolts in. We don't have to hook up the linkage until we get it mounted, unlike other carburetors, which makes it nice. You don't have to balance everything. You just put the carburetor in place and hook up the linkages. And we'll just put the linkage in place here, snap this clip back on, and then get my needle nose pliers here and reconnect the spring. I think I need a new pair of pliers. They don't grip anymore. Well, let's just try the old mitts here, see if I can get it in place. There we go. Alright. I'm not sure what the torque is on these, but you just want to get it tight enough to where you squish these gaskets, but not tight enough to where you strip it, right? So be careful, because you'd really be in a world of hurt if you strip these. And once again, I do both sides at the same time, kind of get them finger tight, and then cinch them down. That should be good. I'm going to make sure that there's no stuff up in there before I mount it back up. And I think before I put this stuff back on, I'm just going to go ahead and test it out. Why not? You can run them without the air filter on them usually, at least for testing purposes. Get a little bit of gas in here. Non-ethanol gas is all I recommend these days, especially for your power equipment. That's good enough. One more thing I want to do first is check the oil, make sure we have oil in this thing before we try to start it. Oh boy. Ew, that's never a good sign. There's hardly any oil in there, at least that I can see. So let's add some. Hopefully it's just low and not completely out of oil here. We'll put in about 6 ounces here and see where we're at. Not quite there. Hope this engine wasn't run for a long time without oil in it. That would suck. Sometimes these folks will buy a new engine and not put oil in it. I've seen that more than once. Let's hope that's not what happened to this one. Well, I'm starting to see a little bit of oil in there. So it was low, but it wasn't empty. And unfortunately, it was lower than I was hoping, but we'll see what happens here. Felt like it had compression when I pulled the rope. All right, so let's test this baby out. Let's make sure the choke is on here. Let's see what we have. Got the throttle about halfway. That's what we want. Yeah, that runs good, I can tell. I think we fixed it, folks. Filling up my garage with smoke, so I'm going to move it back. We'll let this baby warm up a bit. It's been a while since it's been ran.
That's how it's done, son.